Over £155 worth of DLC dropped for Train Sim World in March. Well, in the case of the DB BR147, almost dropped. That is a staggering amount, but believe it or not, well in line with what usually tends to happen. And while not every single release affects every single player, I do think it's fair to say this one hit the vast majority of the community, regardless of what platform you play on. Even if you didn't partake in making any purchases during the month, you would have definitely felt a shift in the atmosphere around the game. With the cancelled previews and funky, to say the least, releases, the chaos at DTG HQ was hard to ignore. As I alluded to, this isn't new. For the last few years now, during the opening month of spring, we've seen the DLC floodgates burst wide open. This year in particular though, a whole nother level of crazy. We saw more of a pile up than a steady flow. For those of you who need a reminder, or who are simply living under a rock, that's okay, let's break it down. And I'll be giving the prices in British pounds, but feel free to convert the numbers to your local currency. Although, bear in mind, players from countries like Switzerland and Poland, for example, suffered a lot more with higher prices due to Steam's poor conversion rate. Anyway, let's get to it. March kicked off with Vector Simulation's first ever release, Liberett's 2 Star Alpaca, on the 10th, priced at £32.99. Now just 3 days later, we get the game's second ever expert loco from TSG, the DBBR145, priced at £29.99. Less than a week and we're looking at over 60 quid. Not even a week after the 145, Dovetail Games drops another Northeast Corridor route, New York to Stamford, coming in at £32.99. Oof. So that's less than halfway through the month and we're already dangerously close to triple digits. A week after Dovetail's release, we had another first-time developer, this time Firefly Simulations, with their Medway Valley Line route, coming in at £29.99. Then on March the 30th, we get the Class 90 locomotive from Alan Thompson Sim at £12.99, and literally the following day on the 31st, the DB BR147 was due to be released by Dovetail Games, only being pulled back on release day. However, I'm going to include it regardless in these calculations because it was due to release within the month. That is 6 releases in the space of 21 days, totaling over £155. Insane. But let's give those numbers some context to help you better understand the situation at hand. Train Sim World typically averages 1 to 2 DLC releases per month. In rare cases, such as we saw last November for example, that number can creep up to 3. So what this means is what we saw in March was 3 times the norm. And let's be honest, how many of these DLCs were polished and in a completely finished state? Well, how about we have a little look at that. Vector Simulation's Check Route launched with 2 scenarios that you just could not complete, and at the time of recording, nothing has been done about that. The Expert BR145 had a number of issues, for example scenarios that you couldn't complete and then you could complete, and then scenarios that you could complete and then couldn't complete. And then there's also the issue, for example, where the CIFA alert isn't audible in external camera views, meaning there were many and there continue to be many frustrating Zwangbremsungs or emergency brake situations, because also at the time of recording this in early April, the situation still hasn't been resolved. New York to Stamford had its preview cancelled, which then resulted in Firefly Simulations catching a stray bullet and having their preview stream also cancelled due to the Northeast Corridor route almost being held back to braking issues on their M8 unit. Let's not forget to note that the route released anyway with that same issue. Medway Valley Line, all credit where it's due towards Firefly, aside from some PS5 odd specific audio issues, had an incredible release. The Class 90 simply had a disastrous launch. Check out my recent video on that if you haven't already. And then of course, the DB BR147 that had its release completely cancelled due to crashing issues, with it again still at the time of recording not being publicly available. So that's approximately 83%, to put it into perspective, of the March releases that are in a problematic state. 83%. That is a staggering statistic. There's an aspect, I think, of tone deafness and just a little bit of being out of touch with reality at play here. I mean, the current climate we're experiencing globally is not a great one right now, with everything that's going on around the world. And most people are struggling with the cost of living, bills, and just basic day-to-day expenses. Gaming should not be a priority, and it's highly likely that for the majority of the player base, people aren't just going to skip DLC, but probably just step away from the game entirely. It gets to a point where the game no longer feels like a fun hobby, but almost becomes a financial commitment, like a subscription. So let's get to the all-important question of why this happens. And I'll prefix that by saying nothing has ever officially been said on the matter, and that's important to bear in mind. So this is more so a logical theory, I will say. For most businesses, if not all of them, the financial year runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March, and when companies want to hit targets, boost their revenue, or just maximize the numbers on their books, you often see a big push towards the end of March. Now, if you're on my streams often, you'll know I have a tendency to say it is what it is to a lot of things, but this one's different. And I say it's different because a concerning question is raised. Are the DLCs being released during this period driven by quality, or are they driven by accounting deadlines? Although, I mean, let's be real, I think that question's posed all year round. And what's further upsetting is while prices have increased year on year, it seems that release quality, the vast majority of the time, is at a complete standstill. It's a really tough sell. However, let's be balanced, let's be fair in what we're saying here. More content isn't a bad thing necessarily. I don't think, to be honest, that can ever be the case with gaming. TSW releases give us more choice and more variety, a higher chance of getting our favourite routes or trains into the game for us to experience, and ultimately richer timetables in the long run. And as I alluded to towards the beginning of this video, you don't have to buy everything. But it's no secret that if you don't buy a particular DLC, it reduces the value of future ones and means that you miss out due to how the layering system works. So then I think we can all agree on one thing. We don't want more content at the cost of quality. We want better content. I don't think anyone would be mad if we had slightly fewer releases if they were more polished and had a higher quality to them. The bug list for the game right now is probably as tall or taller still than the Paris Eiffel Tower. Surely that's not sustainable, not for us the players and not for Dovetail's reputation. A middle ground has to be found where DTG and third parties can remain successful without damaging the players' trust. At the end of the day, if everything was to go left, we have enough content as it is to last us for years to come. Maybe the focus shouldn't be on how much gets released, but how good it is when it does. But hey, maybe I'm completely wrong and completely out of touch. So I'll pose you the question. Would you rather have more and more content coming out each month regardless of quality? Or would you prefer fewer releases at higher quality with bigger gaps in between and, dare I say, possibly at an even higher price? Let me know down below and let's have a proper discussion. Thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, stay safe, health is wealth, and until the next one, peace out.